In 2020, I read one book. That's an average of 0.82 pages a day, or 40 seconds of reading for every 24 hours I spend alive or something. Now, if I'm being honest, that's not great. But let's put it into perspective with a little help from Tim Urban.
So let's just look at this here. All right. Okay, it's a book. So this is the book that you're gonna read this year, okay? And this is the book you're gonna read next year. And this is the book that you might not finish because you're gonna die while reading this book here, okay? This shelf here, up here, is about 55 books. This is all the books you're ever gonna read again. This is it.
Now, if you're like me, that's an unsettling feeling. So here's what we each tend to do. We go online, find the first productivity video that tells you how to read more, and the next thing you know, you're like 15 minutes into Ali Abdal's video on how to remember every single thing you read. Every book, article, podcast, newspaper, the television show you watched last night, breakfast you had in the morning, everything. You remember everything. So you're just like, great, this works out perfectly. You try to replicate the system, and then 48 hours, you're back. Sitting in the same place, watching the same Netflix show, in the same back-breaking posture. Also, if you stick around till the end of the video, I'm going to be conducting a giveaway to give one of you a book of your choice. So if you're interested in getting a book for free, stay tuned, because in some part of the video, I'm going to be talking about how you can win it, but I'm not going to tell you which part. So you're just going to have to watch the whole thing. But yeah, have fun, and I'll see you in the video. The first tip I have is that you should read what relates. Now, what do I mean by that? Before you become someone who is a reader, you should try to understand what you actually like about reading, or what kind of books you like, or what genre you like to read in. The problem is that everybody who tells you to read literally tells you to read. It's like someone saying, oh, you should be a film watcher, or oh, you should be a song listener. Like, what's the point of saying you should be a reader if you don't even know what you want to channel that reading into? So I would say read what relates. And the reason I say that is because everybody at their very core is a little bit selfish, and they kind of want to read things that they think are going to give them the most value, the things they relate to the most, or things that they just genuinely enjoy doing. So personally, for me, I love reading entrepreneurship books. I also love reading books about psychology, because when I read them, it's a lot easier for me to apply whatever I'm reading in those contexts to my life, and it's a lot easier for me to absorb most of it, and I also just like reading those kind of things. If I am somebody interested in entrepreneurship and I'm reading The Emperor of Maladies, which is like a hardcore biology book, chances are I'm not going to enjoy that read as much, and then I'm going to think I don't like reading, which is not necessarily true. You just need to build the habit of reading, and any habit is just like a muscle. The more you train it, the more likely you are to do it. And then after that, your curiosity will just take you wherever you want to go. The things that you actually like or are interested in, you're going to see yourself investing more time into that. You're also going to see yourself retaining more of that kind of material, which is essentially the goal of reading, alongside just making sure that it's a pleasurable activity for you and not a task. So that's the first tip I have. Read what you relate to.
Don't be so messy-headed. I help you meditate with truck in this fancy.
I just noticed there's an oddly shaped patch on my shirt. I don't know why that is. It's not like I particularly sweat from that region. That's not a very appealing thought to have in my mind. You're just gonna have to ignore that for a bit, or I'll probably just like speak from a nice side angle. But the second thing, or the second tip I have for you, is something that author James Clear, from the very famous book Atomic Habits, likes to call habit stacking. Now, whenever you have a habit, or whenever you generate a habit, you're basically creating connections in your brain that become increasingly stronger, which signal the fact that you like it a lot and tends to make that task a lot easier. You don't have to give conscious effort into taking a shower every day, or brushing every day, or eating your meals. I hope you're eating your meals. But the point is that whenever you have a habit, sometimes you can stack your habits, which means if you like doing one particular activity and you're trying to build this new habit, let's say it's reading and let's say it's having a cup of coffee in the morning. If you have a cup of coffee every single morning, then you should try to pair reading with that cup of coffee. You already have almost this subconscious discipline when it comes to drinking your cup of coffee. You will always get that cup. So it's very easy to then pair something else along with it and then also become disciplined about that as well. Another thing that's important to note is that if you like drinking your coffee, or if it's something that gives you a rush in the morning, that rush can be transferred over to whatever you do with it because it's complementing it. So if you like drinking coffee, you're also more likely to like the activity that's going along with that coffee. That makes this little synergy. coffee plus reading. So habit stacking, that's something I suggest you do.
What in the world is gonna make you listen? I got a bottle for two.
The third thing that I think is extremely important whenever it comes to reading is knowing yourself. If you know yourself, you're going to be able to predict how you are when it comes to making habits and how you are when it comes to maintaining any form of discipline, and how many pages you can take in at a time, what kind of genres you can take in at a period of time. These are all things about knowing yourself. So here's the first thing that I knew about myself. If I didn't read in the beginning of the day, I was not going to get to reading. Because the fact of the matter was that reading wasn't a priority for me, and probably still isn't like the biggest priority for me, because all of us have so many other things we'd like to focus on. You have your exams, I have a company that I'm trying to run. There's so many different things that you're trying to do in your day, and reading might not always be the most important one. So if it's not a priority, unfortunately, if you don't get it done at a set time, it means it's never gonna happen. You're not going to be going to bed at like 11:50 in the night and be like, oh my god, I didn't read my 50 pages today or my 30 pages today. So what I like to do is, the moment I get up in the morning, I like to put all of my phones, I don't know why I made it sound like I have more than one phone. I like to put my phone away, I put my laptop away, I put my diary away, and the only thing I keep is a book. And I read that book for a set time of 1 hour. And if I get it done in the morning, then it means I don't have to think about it for the rest of the day. And I almost feel like it's a different part of my day altogether. I have work and then I have reading. So that I don't have any thoughts in my mind when I wake up in the morning. I have a fresh palette to deal with, and I can just sit down and read. The second thing I knew about myself was that audiobooks and podcasts just did not work. I don't know why, but I can't retain information if I'm hearing it, so I don't do it. You should also do that as well. A lot of people will be like, oh yeah, if you're working out, you can listen to a whole podcast. It did not work for me. I would literally be running and then I'd be listening to the podcast, and then I'd just be frustrated that the pace of the podcast was extremely slow because the guy would be speaking in a very calm voice while I'm trying to crush like a 2-kilometer run. So it just doesn't go together at all. If I'm being honest, I'd rather listen to Kendrick Lamar than James Clear talking about his book on atomic habits. So yeah, know yourself, know the kinds of ways you like to deal with the information. And the third thing that I suggest you do when you're trying to know yourself is figure out if you're an analog person or a technology person. What do I mean by that? An analog person is someone who likes to take notes by hand, likes to journal by hand, and basically do everything with the feeling of paper. Tech people, on the other hand, very intuitively are people who would like to read on a Kindle, are people who would like to take notes on their laptop. So try to understand what combination of the two you are. Personally, I don't like using a Kindle, not the biggest fan of it, but I haven't tried it. I just really like the idea of holding like a hardbound book in your hands, like, you know, you can like snort the cover or something. I don't know, people say that books smell nice. I just think it like feels very sturdy. Like when people hold their books, they're always like, they're really like this about it, like it almost as if it gives them some sense of energy. And I feel like a Kindle is like, you know, an A4 paper compared to that. Like you're not gonna, I don't know, I wouldn't give it too much. My hands really don't know what to do right now. I wouldn't give it as much respect as I give a book. Like if you drop your Kindle, you're not gonna touch it and do this. Like I don't do that for a Kindle. But you know, Kindles have advantages. It's a lot easier to read over there. It's a lot more seamless. It's a lot more accessible. I haven't made the transition yet. Maybe someday I do in the future. Not for me right now. Compared to that, when it comes to note taking or trying to retain the things I read in a book, in those cases, yes, I do like to write on a laptop, because realistically, writing everything by hand about what I remember from a book or would like to remember from a book is a very tedious process and not a process I want to be a part of. So yeah, try to remember what balance you are between analog and technology.
And I'm feeling up scared. What in the world is gonna make you listen?
The next tip I have for all of you is have input-based goals. Now, input-based goals basically means that you shouldn't really be measuring reading by the output that you get out of it or what comes out of it. For example, the whole idea of, oh, I read one book every single week, or oh, I read 52 books in a year, or I read 100 books in a year. I'm not the biggest fan of that ideology because, you know, there's this really interesting quote that I'd like to share with all of you. It was given by this individual called Mortimer Adler, and he says, in the case of good books, it does not matter how many books you get through, but how many books get through you. And what that basically means is retention and absorption, and what the impact of a book has on you is much more important than just the sheer quantity of reading of books. And the same way works for habit development. You know, the goal is not to read 100 books a year. The goal is for you to just sit in one place and read for a period of time. Because if you get your inputs in, then I can guarantee at some point in time, you'll eventually get your outputs. Also, reading is not a mechanical process. I've learned that the hard way. I was initially someone who was very like, oh my god, I need to understand everything in this book and I need to absorb everything from this book. I've used those words a lot, but the point is, reading is something that a lot of people do for enjoyment, and as much as any productivity guru will stuff it down your throat that you need to learn and remember every single piece of information, you don't. If it just gives you enjoyment, start with that, and then eventually you can work on note-taking and remembering things first. If you don't have a reading habit in the first place, how are you going to remember anything? One leads to the other. So yeah, have input-based goals. We interrupt this video with a giveaway. So I wanted to give you guys a book, which is why I need you to do 3 things. Number 1, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. If you're new, no. Number 2, like the video. Number 3, comment down below the name of the book you want and why you want it. So that's everything for the giveaway. I'll be picking one of you and I'll ship you the book you want to your address for absolutely no cost. Thank you very much. I mean, you're welcome, I guess. I don't know. Last point, habit tracking.
And I'm feeling a bit scared. What in the world is gonna make you listen?
Whenever it comes to building any single habit, the best phrase I've heard is all you need is mehnat and monitoring. This was told in a completely different context, but I'm going to apply it over here. Mehnat as in effort, and monitoring as in you have to constantly monitor the way your habit is going. And in terms of a reading habit, you should have some form of a way you're able to check yourself or hold yourself accountable on whether you're reading or not. I keep a very simple habit tracker on my application Notion. The amount of times I have referenced this website and this application, they better start sponsoring me real quick. You can open up any simple paper or pen. You can have a little line that just has a tick box for every single day and every single habit. I maintain it technologically, digitally, and every single day I read, I put a little checkbox. I get a little rush of dopamine because I feel like I've actually done something with my day and I don't feel like a failure. So that's how you should maintain your reading habit. Always keep a habit tracker. The next point I wanted to talk about is you need to distinguish between reading and studying. A lot of people, whenever they're talking about how to read more, the point that everybody makes is that if you're not retaining what you're reading, the whole activity of reading is useless. I personally, don't believe in that. I think to develop a reading habit, you need to start just reading for the sake of reading first, and then you can eventually start making notes. But B, and more importantly, you need to separate the times in which you're reading and the times in which you're note-taking, or what I would like to call studying. The reason for that is because if you try to mix both of them together, let's say you're reading a book and at the same time you're trying to make notes for that book. If I'm writing my notes on my laptop and I'm also reading at the same time, the whole process of reading or the whole act of reading just feels like I'm studying, which is not something pleasurable. And I remember early on, I used to do this exact same mistake, and I'd be like, oh, reading is so painful, reading is such a task, I don't want to do it. And I realized the reason I thought it was a task was because I had to literally study the book I was doing. I was annotating these books. So I would suggest that you try to split your sessions into 2 different components. In the first session, which is when I read in the morning, I just read with a pen, and we can get into my note-taking system in a later video. I haven't developed it fully yet, but in a second hour, which is, on every alternate day, I'll just note down every single thing that I have learned from the book, or summarizing it, etc., whatever your note-taking system might be. So I think that you should always separate your reading from your study. So that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next video. Bye. 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 Bye.